Chaos Media Sample.
John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But if the Word was God, then what is the Word? What are words? These creative storytelling symbols make language, and it seems to be that the universal language is mathematics. This is the study of the word God through that mathematical perspective, with a generous helping of psychedelic creativity. Our formula must have a starting point, some sort of coordinate harboring intelligence, aware of its potential, the scintilla of creation. This area of information is size-definite. It is relative to itself, but most pertinent, its thought process and imagination. Be mindful that this graphic representation is an inaccuracy, as the white void and the black spheroidal coordinate are the omniscient omnipresence. But how does something like us come from this? This is us. Obviously, we chose to forget. And the is-us designed its omni-amniotic system of self-digestion, the omega point, fluxing with its subservient state of amnesia. So how does the is-us perform this miraculous game of hide-and-seek, the flowing from the all-knowing to which is known to be unknown? The current mathematical approach to understanding how this system may function does not incorporate an intellect, a motive, but most importantly, consciousness. My objective was to understand a conscious course between O and A. This trajectory has been labeled the radius, also known as R, due to the area of radiation between O and A. The radial distance has been defined as 1 because it is the singular focal length of this equation. The measurement between A and A through O is known as the diameter, also known as D, and building upon the linear hypothesis would equal 2. The measurement between A and A around O is known as pi, or this symbol, and is defined by the total sum of radii needed to complete this trajectory, which is the irrational number 3.141526 and so on, until forever. 2 pi, the almost full rotation of the circle, is known as Tao, or this symbol. These measurements are based on bending the defined radial length along the circumference of the circle, of course, though it's pertinent to absorb this visual diagram for a moment. Sure, these never-ending numbers seem to clarify irrationality and its relation to infinity when studying the circle and sphere. But when incorporating consciousness, I was forced to scrutinize how imperfect these conclusions were. What about 3.14 to infinity, or 6.28 to infinity, is of value to the study of calculus, or this particular geometric understanding, which is all based on the linear measurement of 1. The core fundamental values of mathematics obviously prove that 1 multiplied by Tao equals the irrational number 6.28. The calculations of this circuitous product have only been found through measurements of linearity, straight and direct routes of information. So, a trip down linear lane is the solution for a direct route toward A, though the simplicity of this trajectory leaves only one possible route, and that is the sustained forward momentum. For all intensive purposes, the velocity of this duration is 1, absent of both acceleration and deceleration. Still less leaves any merited explanation as to the imagination's decision to move from O to A again, and so forth. If these open-ended conclusions, pi and Tao, stem from calculations associated with one specific radiating length between the omega point and its alpha state, then the original analysis certainly neglects to explain how the system remains whole and ultimately in correspondence with itself. If you've ever thrown a stone through the air, I'm sure you've noticed that it ends up loosely where you've aimed, depending on your accuracy and its weight, of course. And never, no matter how many attempts, will that stone abruptly change 57-something degrees in the effort to maintain perpetual balance with nature. Another elementary fact of geometry is the 180-degree triangular structure, which in this particular equation is impossible to create given the triradial length and angles based off of the pre-circumferal study. The imperfections associated with the development of these irrational structures, coupled without clarity as to how pi and tau must emanate from the omega point, has led me to conclude that the current mathematical model must be expanded upon, and this is a test of perception. There is an opposite and equally important element in this equation. What has occurred to me is that all linearity is simply the framework, and surfacing from its absence, the circuitous trajectory from one circumferal apex to the next. This circuitous arc is the measurement in which we draw along our omnigrid. The two do not exist without one another, and the acceptance of this thought construct opens the necessary neoportal required of the mind's perception in order to fuse these ratios with creation and develop the God formula. So how does our coordinate, harboring all of the intelligence, communicate with itself? There is a theory associated with the study of physics referred to as the third law of motion that suggests for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. I do apply this theory to the expansion of consciousness. If our data moves from the omega point to its alpha state via the linear model, we develop the diameter. This diameter is an expression of two polarized radii emanating from the omega point. One radius is equal to 1 degree, and there are 360 degrees in a circle. The current model treats these radial movements as deadly sharpened battle arrows sent swiftly from their bow's tightened string. Although arrows only go one way, we must think of these radii as boomerang, still sent with a purpose, but have response and feedback built into the technology of this data transfer system. Furthermore, measuring curvature with perfectly straight lines seems slightly retarding, honestly, and leads to the decimal-pointed irrationalities that we've all been studying for years. But when recognizing all linearity for the simplicity of its coordinates, the circuitous model flawlessly falls into place. The 90-degree arc from A to A marks its quadrant and has a value of 1. This exact measurement, when bent 90 more degrees from A to O, still holds a value of 1 and reunites with the omega point. This is our radius, and remains another equal measurement of its quadrant. Moreover, bending these radii to their origin completes one full fractal cycle, leaving a 16th size second dimensional clone, or a 64th sized in the third dimensional respect. These clones retain all the necessary schematics in order to have 64 spherical children of their own. We must understand that the linear grid is the platform in which our conscious, circuitous measurements explore, and bending your perception will allow you to pierce beyond the veil of mathematical illusion and come to terms with two opposite entities equaling the same value. And this is the qubit, the metaphorical oystered pearl, the cube's polished sphere. The qubit is of duality, a fractal singularity. It is infinity in a finite space, and its schematics are of a repetitive 3-tier protocol. based off of the simple continued quartering of the targeted cuboidal area. This qubit unfolds forever in a polarized fractal manner with equal and opposite reaction. It follows the linear guidelines, of course, and only requires a 1/3 reduction to uncover what we've learned to be the 16 qubits, that would be 64 in the third dimensional respect, which are necessary to factualizing creation.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The omnigrid is entirely sized relative to its specific tier. These icons are of equal value, coexisting in this mathematical matryoshka. Fragmentally, forever. The 3-tier fractal system has left us with 4 specific measurements: a compass, merely the stage for its cast, and 3 circuitous lines of equal value, consciously exploring their framework. This system's full cycle always results with the whole, from whence it came. The elimination of irrationality from this equation, subletted by my curious, exploratory circuitousness, has altered the perception of pi and Tao from their once irrational decimal-pointed numbers into the rational quadriratials based on the flexible measurement of 1. Defluxing through this interface is by no means linear, and the substituted curved radii still equal 1, effectively redefining pi as 2 and Tao as 4 through this fractal system. This perspective was absolutely necessary to develop as our key in the study of the word God, as you will later see, due to the flawlessness in each ratio's unfolding into the next beginning, allowing for the infinite exploration within the confines of the Tao membrane. The qubit is the Trinity, and the third unfolding inward creates the quadritier and tier shape, which has revealed the missing clue to this divine puzzle, the golden ratio, phi, or this symbol, A plus B equals C. What is absolutely necessary to understand from the prequel in order to move forward is that consciousness can only be measured by circuitous lines. X, Y, and Z all equal 1 and are the routes of Tao through the 64-qubit system. Phi is a representation of how Tao uses pi to fold or unfold into another tier. This tier shape and its relative size to the harboring sphere consumes 1/12 of the circumferential distance. Each tier meets the next, totaling 12 30-degree sectors, and creates vector equilibrium.
I can't see you.
Close your eyes.
The 3-phase gyroscope meets equilibrium as the tiers slip into their special spaces, creating the perpetual balance, pinned to the epicentral omega point. The flux is where the quadricuboidal fractal continues to breathe inward, forever. And this discrete quantity of energy, proportional in magnitude to the frequency of the radiation it represents, is the system in which quantum physics was built around. The study that accepts one miraculous catalysis they call the Big Bang, but refuses to acknowledge spirit and ultimately God. A deeper look at the structural pattern of this tier in relation to the qubit has made it very clear how this new golden ratio is in fact an addition to Tao, due to its originating at the omega point, completing a full cycle of Tao, but rather than mathematically collapsing into itself, we see the ratio break the interface of the Tao membrane and continue its forever outward, equally expanding exploration. This golden ratio can be found everywhere in nature, and the Tao ratio is the omega point, which sits at the epicenter of all golden ratios. Tao is the Trinity, an infinite three-phase reduction cycle, yielding two equally opposite clones at 1/64th the size of their predecessor, which remain mathematically whole and still relative to their individual self. This symbol, that resembles dueling fish, was named the yin-yang based off of the writings of the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu of 6th century BC. Yin to yang translates dark to bright, referring to the hill's shadowed, mossy overgrown northern slope to its southern face, which catches every sun ray thrown its way. This is truly Tao's masterpiece, the golden ratio. A plus B equals C. The past combined with the present equals the future, and this rational system uses both measurements we've analyzed: unconsciousness, expressed by the linear framework, and its conscious circuitous curved awareness. The sunflower's vibrant seed pod to the sliced nautilus shell, or the pine cone's brilliantly designed geometry, to every species residing on Earth that has unwillingly sustained consciousness and has effectively enabled a self-correspondent system. And to its credit, Tao, the conductor of the material matrix via tropical storm or stardust cluster, the creator of space and time, though absent of both, hides behind the curtain of metaphysical duality. This wizard, the mind gear, is the most beautiful yet parasitic virus I can think of, that with irrefutable evidence proves to be terminal. This amniotic psychosis weaved through illusion is the epitome of epidemia, the curse of death or awakening, however you choose to define breaching the interface. The connections between these mathematical patterns and nature are truly captivating and could be left at that. But what is even more peculiar is that we often see depictions of our cuboidal trinity bent at the lower stems of field crops, leaving them unharmed. It wasn't until the late 17th century that crop circles found their way into the history books. But the facts are that these works of art have been stealthily appearing on these moonlit dewy fields since. Of course, many have been faked and exposed. However, there is a definite unmatchable meticulousness in the artistry associated with the more forthcoming messages that are likely to be of the same creator. I've come to a crossroads on this conclusion. Either we have an extremely talented individual or group whom study the schematics of nature and secretly modify these crops, or we may be discovering responses to all the profoundly volatile experiences unfolding along the space timeline, leaving the Tao fingerprint, creating memory and wisdom, some sort of response to itself, clues to the utopian balance in which it seeks. Nature is perfect and will have its way. It seems highly unlikely that these agricultural alterations surface from UFO-steering aliens. I am convinced that there is only one extraterrestrial, the omni-amniotic system, the omega point and its alpha state, and every creature of its imagination. This study of psycho-metaphysical geometric fusion proves there is only one, that is really three: the Trinity, the seed of life, the seed to your life. These fields are the perfect canvas for these works of art, though the crops that rise from their dirt are no exemption to the laws of nature, and eventually fall victim to unconsciousness, just like the rest. Not to mention that sooner than later, the message will vanish, especially due to the farming aspect. Nothing living lasts, and their short life expectancy has already been planned. So why the field? It seems likely that if you're capable of this craft, the eventual harvesting of your canvas must be apparent. I sat with this, furthering my studies, and realized that this message has been right in front of the eyes of this intelligent civilization of antiquity. We have clearly missed the message, and maybe these crop circles are an attempt to grab our attention in a fresh way. We can find this historical message architecturally designed to precision across Earth's many abandoned megalithic sites, like at the Osirian Temple in Abydos, Egypt, where you'll find the divine pattern mysteriously laser-etched into the temple ruins. Under the paw of the Phuket, the Chinese guardian lion at the Yonghe Temple in Beijing, China. Stonehenge in Europe, Wiltshire, England. A bird's-eyed view of the circuitous monument leaves some sort of insight into the builder's motives. The more well-known megalithic site can be found in Africa, at the Giza Plateau of Egypt. These towering pyramidal structures are aligned north-south with an accuracy of up to 0.05 degrees, and are a reflection of this tier system. Though the two larger pyramids are in perfect sync with the Tao protocol, the smaller pyramid has been precisely offset, and a little math has revealed its very interesting location. We see this architectural design validated by the constellation Orion, which was clearly part of this theme, guarded by another lion, the potentially recarved anthropomorphic Sphinx, watcher of the western sun. Other very similar sites are found in southern Mexico and Central America, like the Mayan pyramids, and a very well hidden Asian site off the coast of Japan. There is definitely cosmic inspiration applied to these structures that is indefinitely true to the laws of nature, on all scales from a raindrop to the eye of a galactic spiral. Why go through the trouble of building such megaliths? Was it to draw our attention to the mathematics associated with nature? This study of the word God, the creative storytelling symbol or formula called God, is the coexistence of Tao and Phi, which creates what is known as toroidal flow. And when applying this algorithm to the word God, I've discovered irrefutable evidence that the creator of this term chose it specifically to express their understanding of nature. This word clearly expresses the understanding of the singularity, or the quantum flux, the equal and opposite explosion and implosion of consciousness spiraling out from its center, effectively creating the Trinity and memory bank. The first brushstroke to this matrix, the prequel to the Book of Genesis, the first metabolic division on the seed of life. The seed to your life. The Word of God, first referred to as Yahweh or the Tetragrammaton, analyzed with our newly formed pi and Tao ratios, captures a second-dimensional schematic of the three-tier cuboidal trinity emanating from the omega point, creating Phi, the golden ratio, and ultimately cloning itself. God moved upon the face of the waters, and with its word said, "Let there be light." This cell division creates a shape known as the Vesica Pisces, the lens in which the Isus witnesses its glory. The graphic enhancement to Yahweh for the Word of God is the incorporation of the tier system to the already divine formula expressed through the continuously drawn combination of circuitous and linear measurements, with the understanding of the true values of pi and Tao and how they're relative to the golden ratio. G-O-D